You're all good.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Executive Committee meeting for Manhattan Community Board 4 for April. My name is Jeffrey LaFrancois. I'm chair of the board, and I'm pleased to be here calling this meeting to order this evening. We are meeting on the squares by executive order of the mayor, of course, which will be also a topic of discussion later on our agenda this evening. This video is being streamed live on our YouTube channel and will be accessible to all immediately after the meeting as well. Tonight, we'll take up our agenda as is set forth, except there is a new business item that is not on the agenda, which is there is an illegal demolition taking place on West 48th Street, as well as the mental health letter that it was in the Dropbox, but we're going to sort of formally take that up as new biz tonight. Those are the two key items, right, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay, so may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Christine. Okay, so moving with that, jumping right in, pleased to have before us the Capstone team, which was established last fall. And Jessica, our first vice chair, has been chairing that effort. So I'm going to pass it over to her for introductions and to share what they've been up to.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey, and good evening, everyone. I will make it brief because most importantly, you want to hear from the students who have been assigned to work with us. We have 4 students from NYU and have been working together with members of the board that Jeffrey had identified for the most relevant committees who are associated with the work that they would be tackling. And what was that work? It was to look at the issue of connectivity and access to the far west side. So this was an opportunity to really bring a fresh perspective, but also building on, of course, all of the expertise of not only our committees, and we had, and they'll share more, but representatives from the 2 land use committees, waterfront and parks, as well as transportation, but also to hear directly from the community through surveys and other outreach tools, and really to bring those voices together based on their experience as students and the resources that they have available to rethink some potential opportunities, but to look at trouble areas or trouble zones on the far west side as it relates to access and connectivity. And so we've been working over, as Jeffrey mentioned, these last several months, almost 8 months, where they've really dug in. I want to thank everyone who joined our walking tours or had an opportunity to share your knowledge and experience of life in the district with them. And before I kick it over to them, I do just want to say that, one, we know this, but our district is, as are all districts in New York, as is New York, right? A whole city in every block. And so for them to learn each block by block was a lot. It was a big project to take on. And so they've really narrowed, you'll see some very specific recommendations related to, specific corners, because they could not look at the whole district. There just simply was not enough time. Additionally, what they are presenting today is just a presentation. It is not to go before a vote. It is to get to share with you what they've been doing. I think you'll all be very proud. 2, to get some additional feedback, but also for you to know that this is going to ultimately be work that can go back to committee, back to your committees, or if you see relevant opportunities in the different areas of the board that you work on, to flesh these ideas out even further and to say, what can this look like? How do we want to gain support or further flesh out these ideas? And so this tonight is really a jumping off point for that process. And hopefully as they finalize their recommendations in a report form, that will go back to each of you who are interested in picking up these ideas, or as I said, refining them even further to finally actualize them. And then the last note is Jeffrey gave this group specific instruction, which was that this was not to be, we've been using the phrase big swings. This was not to say, if we could have whatever we want from 14th Street to 59th, west of 11th, what would that be? It was to look really at some particularly actionable items that could improve the district and could make a meaningful difference, but could be done, in a relatively short term. And so I know there's been some challenges or comments about that, why wasn't this more revolutionary, or why didn't we see things that really thought totally anew? And we knew that that's because, one, those things often are good ideas, but they sit on a shelf. But two, that there's so much, as we know, with any big project that's come before our district, whether it's, Penn Station redesign or Hudson Yards or, bringing the Olympics to New York City. These are very challenging, fraught discussions that need so much time and input. And it simply was not available to this team for this exercise. So I'll just caution you all, or offer that as word of caution as you think about the comments that you may share in response to their presentation. So with that, they should introduce themselves, and then Michelle or whomever wants to take the lead. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and we're excited to introduce you to the Executive Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4.
Thank you, Jessica. So my name is Michelle. I'm joined here by my teammates, Camille, Christina, and Shuang Tu. And, of course, we'd like to thank Jessica and the working group that we've been collaborating with over the last 8 or 9 months. It's been a really rewarding and interesting process. We're excited to share a little bit into what we've been working on this year. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen and see if we are able to get that to work. All right.
We see it.
All right, great. So we'll go ahead and kick things off. Like Jessica mentioned, we have been working with folks from the Transportation and Waterfront and Parks Committee to come up with a plan for promoting access and connectivity on the far west side. So how can we connect folks in the neighborhood with all these wonderful assets on the west side of 9A? And just to give you an overview of our agenda, we'll be covering our capstone scope, methodology, our findings and recommendations, as well as our next steps and conclusion. So with that, I will go ahead and kick it over, I believe, to Christina to cover our capstone scope.
Hi, everyone. You guys probably know the background of this area better than any other group of people in the city, so we won't cover that too much. But as you know, your district extends from 14th to 59th, and we decided to focus on the far west side of that, west of 11th Avenue, extending into the piers and towards the river in the area that you guys reached out to us as that being sort of disconnected from the rest of the neighborhood and the residents in that area. So overall, our main objectives were to improve accessibility for pedestrians and micromobility users that are accessing Hudson River Park and the waterfront, and those amenities on the waterfront in areas like the Meatpacking District, and better incorporating those far west blocks with the rest of the district through urban design interventions and sort of bridging that gap to make it not feel so kind of far away when you're walking. And finally, we are almost done with a deliverable that can be used as a guideline, as Jessica mentioned, for you guys to move forward in your committees and as that jumping off point. And I'll pass it off to Camille, I believe, for methodology.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. Yeah, so as we've kind of touched on, this whole process was extremely in-depth. And we wanted to, with the help of the working group, really kind of touch, stakeholders and all of the kind of knowledge that we could get before we conducted our analysis and determined our focus areas. So as you all know, we kind of began with bi-weekly meetings with the working group. And so, again, thank you all. It was really, really a rewarding process. We also conducted a 311 analysis, as well as put out a survey that ended up reaching 153 participants, just to kind of get an understanding of their familiarity with the area, their safety, what they normally, what mode of transportation they normally use to access the area, what they feel is not connected to the rest of the far west side in terms of specific assets. So that was very helpful for us to get both qualitative and quantitative responses and kind of identify areas of interest. Similarly, we did 4 focus groups 2 with residents, 1 with CBOs in government, and 1 with real estate. And those were all really informative as well. We got kind of a full look at, how folks both access and use Far West Side, as well as what they feel is most challenging, what they feel may have opportunity for growth or improvement. And then finally, we did site visits with the working group, which again, were wonderful. We were able to really get that personal understanding, our feet on the ground. We were all kind of familiar, had varied familiarity with the area. So this really helped us to kind of see what we were learning about close up. And so from all of those sources, we determined 3 focus areas that we felt presented unique opportunities or unique challenges to the area as a whole. And so we kind of centered in on Pier 97, the area surrounding the cruise terminal, and Chelsea Waterside Park. And then we also provided some study area-wide findings and recommendations as well, that we felt were kind of common trends and could be sort of expanded for future study later on. And so we'll now turn to our first focus area, Pier 97. I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Camille. So I'll give a high-level overview of our findings and recommendations at Pier 97. But one of the reasons that we zoomed in on this area is because this new beautiful park will be opening, and we want to ensure that folks in the area can safely access the park. And then also, what are some opportunities just to improve the surrounding area, so that we can engage even further with the community. So here's just a summary of our core findings in this focus area. First being there's no direct access to Pier 97 from the east side of West 57th Street and 12th Ave. There's unrealized connectivity potential at West 59th Street, that area under the overpass, and that the street geometry at West 55th Street presents safety challenges. So giving you, again, just really high-level bullet points of some of our recommendations for addressing that direct access. We're exploring opportunities for wayfinding, so better signage to connect folks from, the inner avenues and the area along 9A to the park. Exploring opportunities to activate both the pedestrian island located at West 57th Street, and then also a sidewalk activation of shared street model for 12th Avenue from West 55th up to West 57th, given those broad sidewalks. Also, exploring the potential or feasibility of potentially installing a crosswalk at West 57th Street. And then moving on to finding 2, this is focused on the connectivity potential at West 59th Street. A common theme you'll see throughout a lot of our recommendations is wayfinding. But here we saw really the opportunity to really activate this overpass, and we included some example models from it's called Underline Park in Miami, but installing some street furniture, a city bike station, incorporating some art. And then finding 3, focus on West 55th Street. So this is the southern closest access point to Pier 97 Park. So the measures here are really focused on safety. So recommendations for lengthening crossing times and other traffic calming measures, so folks can safely cross 9A. And with that, I will pass it over to Camille to chat through the Manhattan Cruise Terminal.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So we identified the Manhattan Cruise Terminal as an area of interest, and want to first kind of highlight that we weren't just considering sort of the actual cruise terminal itself, but also kind of the area immediately surrounding it. So specifically 48th to 55th Street. So that is kind of a basis for our recommendations and findings, which again, are based on, I think majority would be the survey and focus group data. So kind of here's a sort of brief summary of our findings for the cruise terminal. Again, you see that wayfinding to and from the cruise terminal is extremely limited. We specifically identifies this as originating from 9th to 11th Ave to the area surrounding the cruise terminal. There are narrow walkways along the Greenway for that across that bidirectional bike lane from 46th to 54th Street, which doesn't allow much space for pedestrians because you have that kind of conflict between cyclists and pedestrians. And then we also identified illegal drop-off by cars, ride shares, cabs along the West Side Highway, causing dangerous conditions for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as other vehicles. So for finding one, we felt that signage to indicate the best routes both to and from the cruise terminal between 9th and 11th Avenues would be especially helpful. We specifically wanted to activate all of the bus stops with proper signage to and from the area. So you can see this is an image from a bus stop in Paris that we felt was kind of a good case study. We also felt that just the area right in front of the cruise terminal, DeWitt Clinton Park, is a really wonderful space that we felt could potentially host more events, local events, community programming, cultural events, etc. So we wanted to recommend seeking out opportunities via grants to kind of attract other communities who may not typically be going to the area to the park. And then we also wanted to suggest lengthening the traffic signal timing cycles for the area around the cruise terminal between 48th and 55th Street to allow more time for individuals to cross 9A. For finding 2, where you see in the image here that kind of conflict between pedestrians, cyclists, and cars, we wanted to install bike lane signage and speed tables to alert and slow cyclists, just to, to encourage pedestrian safety. And then we also received a recommendation from working with the working group that it would really help to kind of widen these pedestrian paths and sort of beautify this barrier along the Greenway. So just up ahead between 48th and 55th, it's kind of a fenced off area. We wanted to potentially explore the opportunity of opening that area up since it's been kind of closed off due to security concerns post 9/11. So we felt that that could be an area that could really be reimagined for pedestrians to utilize in the future. And then finally, this kind of illegal drop-off along 9A causes dangerous conditions for pedestrians. So kind of the official method to enter the cruise terminal is via 55th Street. But if cars drop off passengers on 9A, it can cause congestion as well as safety issues. So we wanted to improve the signage to direct both passengers and vehicles to the proper drop-off point at 52nd. So if you're going north, that would be a left turn on 55th. We wanted to also kind of increase monitoring to prevent this illegal drop-off, working with the EDC as well as the cruise terminal. And then finally, we wanted to install additional city bike stations to sort of promote alternative transportation modes, as there are not a ton of them located in the area directly surrounding the cruise terminal. And with that, that is our cruise terminal focus area. So I will turn it over to Shuang-Tu to talk about Chelsea Waterside Park.
Thanks, Camille. I apologize for things. There's some technical issue with my camera, so please forgive me that I can't show my face to all members here. But let's get started with our focus area 3, Chelsea Waterside Park, which is located at West 23rd Street and the West Side Highway. is currently undergoing construction improvements. So our methodology for this focus area is also based on site visits, interviews with focus groups, and analysis with some data sets. This is a brief summary of the Chelsea Waterside Park. We found that the high bicycle traffic impacts accessibility from 11th Avenue to the park, and there's limited east-west mobility for public transit to the park. Also, there's a lack of connectivity from 23rd Street to park and the waterfront area. And based on 311 complaint data, we also found the intersections of 11th Avenue and 22nd Street and 23rd Street are in poor condition. So for the first finding, there's heavy traffic flow from 22nd Street to 24th Street heading west to the park. Also, some residents gave us some feedback that pedestrian and bicycle traffic significantly conflict with each other en route to far west side from 11th Avenue. Our recommendation is to convert 22nd and 21st Street to Shear Street with wider sidewalk and much greening to give more space to bikes and pedestrians. CB4 can coordinate with EOT to evaluate the feasibility of installing bike lanes at 11th Avenue and pedestrian-oriented intersections to clear divert traffic. Also, they need explore cart extensions and bollards to keep bicycles away from the crosswalk. Then we found there exists limited east-west mobility for public transit to the park. Although some bus and subway lines are accessible to get to the Chelsea Waterside Park neighborhood, there's a lack of direct roads from inland areas. So our team recommended that the M12 road can be updated. Based on MTA statistics, the ranking of M12's annual ridership has been in the bottom of all Manhattan bus lines since 5 years ago, which indicates its low usage. Therefore, CB4 and the MTA can work together to add Waterside Park as a stop or explore a new path for MTA bus. Next, we notice the lack of connectivity from 23rd Street to the park and waterfront area. The roadway from 23rd Street through Chelsea Waterside Park to 12th Avenue is currently under construction. However, 23rd Street has a high volume of pedestrian flow, and there are 3 MTA bus stops and 2 subway stations that transport large numbers of people to the neighborhood. So our team suggested additional signage leading from 22nd and 24th Street toward Chelsea Waterside Park and Hudson River Park. In addition, during the renovation process, we recommend that the Chelsea Waterside Park Association and MCB4 work closely with the landscape architect to preserve the public pathway from 23rd Street to the crosswalk of 12th Avenue, avoiding tall trees and facilities from blocking views of visitors. Last, based on the 311 complaint data analysis, we found that the intersection of 11th Avenue and 22nd and 23rd Streets are hot risk points due to abandoned vehicles, poor street conditions, and sewer conditions. To resolve it, CB4 can negotiate with NYC DEP to increase sanitation enforcement and update infrastructure at the intersection of 23rd Street and 11th Avenue. They also need to collaborate with DOT to install some wayfinding and directional signage to the nearby parking garages. We have worked, okay, next I'll pass it to Christina to talk about our study area.
Do you want to? I'm going to take. Oh. Did you mute?
Christina, are you there?
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Hi, sorry. Study area wide findings recommendations. I will take over. This will be a lot of reiteration from what we've seen. This is the even higher level overview of our study area. So generally, we noticed a lot of blank streetscapes on 11th and 12th, as well as those cross streets. And it makes walking unpleasant for pedestrians. It's not the most welcoming experience that we would like to have. Secondly, wayfinding, as we've mentioned, to that far west side needs to be improved. And conflicts between all these different modes interacting and all these different pathways are creating conflict. So the first finding, we're proposing to install urban design interventions such as these tree pits and other greenery to make walking, more welcoming and more pleasant experience, and creating that buffer between, the bustling vehicles of 9A and the pedestrian spaces. And we also propose improving sanitation measures or cooperating with DSNY to improve sanitation measures, or private carriers if necessary. Since this is the side of a highway, it tends to pick up litter similarly to the side of a highway, which is obviously also not great for pedestrians. So improving those sanitation measures could really change the experience there, as well as the possibility of including a public art program similar to that of the Times Square Alliance, potentially working with the Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen bid or the meatpacking bid to create a rotating public art program. Next slide, please. And these are some more examples of potential signs. But what the most important part is what is on these signs, which would include distance from the current location to potential destinations, as well as the approximate timing for cycling and walking to that destination is important, so people know where to go and how they can get there. And particularly for this area, closest crossing points are very important, because as we know, there's not a crossing at every block. And someone may not know if that nearest crossing is north of them, south of them, depending on which direction they're heading if they're walking down 10th, for example. So that's a really important point to include in signage in this district specifically. And then finally, as we all know, there's a lot of conflict between all these different modes that utilize this far west side. We have the highway, the greenway, and all of these lovely pedestrian spaces. So we propose introducing traffic calming measures, trying to reduce the speed of those vehicles and make it feel like they're not as, that these modes don't have to conflict as much as they do, and they can kind of share the space more effectively. And again, with cyclists and pedestrians specifically, we do have those pedestrian crossings in that bi-directional bike lane, and that can create a lot of conflict, and there's not a ton of regulation or enforcement with bikes and e-bikes and things like that. So it's trying to look into how to manage that more cleanly and reduce those conflicts and injuries. And finally, prioritizing pedestrians' usage of the street. This is a big thing I know for CB4, and as we have those more and more amenities on the far west side, pedestrians will be kind of traversing this area more frequently and in larger groups. So making sure that their experience is pleasant and it's an area that can handle large volumes of pedestrians in a way that is friendly for them. And then for our next steps and conclusions, we have an implementation matrix, which will be available in our final paper, but it provides the short, medium, long term, which goals are short, medium, and long term, and that kind of relative time frame, as well as relevant stakeholders for each of those items. As you can see, there's some examples on the right, such as the EDC for the cruise terminal, state DOT, city DOT, a lot of different players involved. And some of the areas that we unfortunately didn't get to look into more closely that definitely call for further research would be the Javits Center and the Hudson Yards connectivity, Pier 76, the potential for pedestrian bridges and viaducts, and obviously the highly discussed congestion pricing possibility that will be affecting the area possibly soon-ish. And that will definitely call for some more research, especially with the highway and everything. So that's our presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. We can maybe, whoever's driving, we can take it down so you can see each other's faces again. I think we wanted to keep the presentation tight, but hopefully, Jeffrey, we have some time if there are comments or questions.
Sure.
But do want to just remind folks that this will go back, hopefully, to the Capstone team will be, this is not their final product. This presentation was something they put together for tonight's executive committee. They are working on a document which will then be able to be shared with all of you and sort of be up to our committees to determine how we embrace each of those recommendations and begin to further flesh out and advance them with all the key constituents and stakeholders in the community. So with that, are there any questions or comments? And just want to acknowledge that on this call, Leslie played such an integral role. Christine played such an integral role. Of course, Jesse was immensely valuable. JD, also joined us and led a walking tour. Jeffrey set us on this path. So it's really been a great process with so much key stakeholder CB4 input. Paul, I see your hand.
Oh, I think Maria went up before me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Ladies first, Maria.
Thanks, Jessica. I was gonna not say anything. Oh, my question, it may have been said, but I'm sorry if it was said and I missed it. The focus groups were who?
So we can share a list, but the committee, I'm sure it'll be in an appendix, will list who participated, but the committee put together, I think maybe Camille, you forgive me, I don't know who mentioned, but different segments of the list. The invite was sent to from real estate to community block associations and really trying to get kind of the local grassroots feeling. Participation was light, response was light,
Okay.
but and that's where we decided to pivot or include also the survey, which people could just more easily, more quickly complete. But Capstone team, please feel free to chime in with any other specifics. But again, I think Maria, in the appendix, I imagine we'll have the list of everyone who joined the focus groups.
Okay. I look forward to seeing this complete. It was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Thanks. This is really great. The work you guys did is remarkable, given, as was pointed out at the beginning, this is an incredibly complex district and a lot of complex issues. So I could probably ask you about 30 questions. But I did want to just focus in a little bit on accessibility east-west. And the bus lines you looked at were the M11 and M12. But I know that the M23, the M42, and the M50 all have terminals at the river, right? So the M23 comes into Chelsea Piers and loads and unloads there. So I'm wondering if you had any other examination of some of those east-west running bus lines and the possibility of potentially putting maybe another bus terminal at the cruise terminal or something like that. Like use an MTA bus to load and unload at the cruise terminal, and if that would be any sort of option that you could foresee.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. And I apologize for the flashing lights. I popped into an empty classroom and it's motion censored, so it keeps turning on and off. But I think that's great feedback. We definitely index and research the buses and transit lines in the area, and we didn't end up focusing in on those other ones. So that's something that we can take into further consideration or propose for further research. So thank you for bringing that up.
I think another point that kind of we've grappled with a lot is who the audience of this sort of accessibility is. And we settled on residents primarily, and the residents mentioned taking mostly the M11 and M12 due to the north-south range of the district and not as much the crosstown bus. So those were kind of just what came up the most in terms of our focus groups and surveys for those two bus lines. But yeah, absolutely, the crosstown buses do provide a lot of service for residents, I guess primarily outside the district.
Thanks.
Katie? Sorry, Justin.
Thanks. Well, this is a lot of great information. So thanks so much for all of this work. So I just had a quick question. As Paul said, there are so many things to talk about, but he actually mentioned sort of the east-west issue. And I recall that one of the ideas that was mentioned was the possibility of converting 22nd and 24th streets to shared streets. And I wondered if that idea came out of like the survey or one of the focus groups, or it was just an idea someone had. So I guess I'm wondering what was the genesis of that idea? And also whether or not any of you had heard or participated in, there was our community board heard quite a bit of feedback about a shared street that got started a couple years ago, maybe, I don't even know a year or two ago. Anyway, the people on the shared street seemed to like it a lot. And then all the neighboring streets, there was different feedback. So I just wondered sort of what the genesis was and if you were familiar with some of the other feedback that we'd gotten about another shared street.
May I take that? So I think the feedback is coming from our group and especially my recommendation. Katie, the issue you are bringing up about Open Street 22nd Street, it's not a shared street. It's an open street. So it's different. And the open street issue is that they have a barricade and it was difficult to open and close the barricade. Okay, so that's not that. The shared street is an evolution of that, where there is no barricade, but the design of the street make it that it slows down car. So a shared street.
So there are still cars that can go back, like it's
Right.
still a through street, you're saying?
Yes, but it is preferred for pedestrians, and the cars are supposed to go very slow on the street.
Oh, okay.
And there is a design of the street which slows down the cars so that pedestrian and bicycle have priority in a sense. So that's two different animals.
Okay. Are there any of those in our district right now?
No, they are in, on Broadway, in Union Square, in Washington Square, and in fact, on Open Street 22, probably DOT is going to come back with a proposal to make it in a shared street, to convert it to a shared street.
Gotcha. Thanks.
I don't see any other questions. I, in particular, want to thank the Capstone team. I want to thank Jeffrey for the idea to elevate this as an opportunity for us to really explore the far west side. It was a lot of fun, and we look forward to the final product, and really want to acknowledge that everyone who, not just the people who are part of the exec and who are on the call tonight, but everyone who participated truly participated very fully, were open to ideas, to exchange. It was a really nice example of how our community board can work together to kind of explore a new topic. I think we all really enjoyed this process and very much look forward to the final report and seeing how we can advance this through our committee work in the coming year.
Thanks, Jessica. And again, to the Capstone team, bravo. I'd also say I have fond memories of the freezing cold tours that we did. It's a windy western edge, so thank you all for that. And props also to our friends at Hudson River Park who provided golf cart tours to the team as well to really entrench them and familiarize them with the West Side. So thank you everybody for this, and Jessica for leading, and to all those on the working group. Looking forward to the final product on this. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda this evening. So we've been meeting on the squares for over 3 years now. And it is our understanding that we are approaching a point at which the mayor will no longer continue signing the executive order. The federal emergency declaration expires in May. The governor stopped signing executive orders back in February, March, or January, February, and the mayor has been signing them at various levels through today, and the current one expires in the middle of May. Last year, we adopted our hybrid meetings policy, which two key factors of that. Committee meetings would take place physically at our board office. And if we wanted to take formal votes, you'd need an in-person quorum for that meeting. We would discourage the public from attending in person, but of course, welcome their participation virtually. Full board meetings would be also in person at, I think we have a Hotel Trades lined up. We've got Fulton Center, other places as well for this summer. And, we had discussion previously of committees, hybrid, quorum in person versus, and where formal votes can be taken, versus committees on the squares, votes taken with a codification at the full board meeting. So that's our policy. We're approaching a fact where we have to put it into effect. Wanted to throw it open for some reaction or discussion, but that I can tell you we are planning absolutely for full board meetings in the summer to be in person at a minimum. Carrie.
Thanks. Can you just again explain really quickly the process by which, if we don't have quorum in person and we can't vote, can you just explain then what the process is? Because I know that it's not that we do nothing. Like I just don't recall.
So it would then it would be recommended to the full board, and the board's vote is what would carry the committee's letter.
So
it's a parliamentary process, right? The quorum provides like the technical vote on the letter. That then counts as a committee vote, which is then transmitted to the full board for consideration. The full board always, no matter what, that full board vote is what carries the letter at the end of the day. Even without a committee vote or a committee vote where we send the letter beforehand and it's ratified, it's still voted on by the full board.
so we
Jesse,
would make
a
recommendation, and
it's
then
pretty much how it can be thought of, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only other caveat there would be obviously if, we could bring it to exec and you're bringing it to exec with a consensus from the committee. But you've done this before. On a rare occasion, a committee would not have a quorum. They would make a consensus. Technically, it just isn't listed under. What happens is it's not listed under your committee. It'd be listed as basically new business or exec. But it would be the same internally. The behind the scenes, you guys would be drafting a letter for review and recommend and hopefully approval by the full board.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Joe?
So if during the hybrid period, what if a committee decided to actually just meet in person? How would that work?
So that's at the board office?
No, I'm saying, right. So
you mean solely in person, Joe?
Yeah. Let's say there's an issue that comes up. That's a large attendance expected, and the board office is not going to be big enough, right? That's happened sometimes, right? How do we manage that?
I mean, do you mind if Jeffrey?
All yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to take them like how we normally would before COVID, obviously. I mean, I think if, let's say we've got a large ULURP or you've got a large, human services, application or affordable housing application or something along those lines, that we know is just going to be a number of folks coming out, and we feel like no matter what, even if we try to recommend being virtual, people
not going to be comfortable.
Right, it's just people are going to want to show up in person. They feel passionate enough about it. We'll have to get an alternative space. I mean, we've done that before. Like, we've used Hartley House. We've used the location. So knowing that in advance obviously is key. For
Jeffrey and Jesse, are we still going to continue to broadcast on YouTube Or,
Yes, because we will broadcast on YouTube, and that is where the public would be encouraged to participate from.
right, but I'm saying in the event of like it's some big issue, we're going to be at Hartley or something like this, right? How does that happen?
So we have a vendor, like we used the vendor for the last full in-person hybrid full board meeting we did at the Highline. We had that vendor. We would use that vendor. You know, it's not cheap and we don't have any additional budget yet dedicated to that. And I think this is sort of one of the reasons this is put on the agenda was last time we discussed that we might want to pick up the mantle of advocating for funding again for this issue. But yeah, that's what we would do, Joe. We would have a vendor who comes in. The nice thing about that is that they manage everything, right? That's their job. They can't bring in the cameras, they bring in the microphone. I mean, well, we have the microphones, but they bring in, you know, the wires, the computers, the whole thing. They're streaming it live. We're doing the Zoom and that kind of thing. And
like we did on that meeting on the Highline, like that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yep. To add to, since we're getting into this, you know, what each of you guys need to do as co-chairs of your committee is think about this, is that traditionally you had, before COVID, you would have your staff member, myself or Nellie or Janine, set up the meeting physically, right? Be there, make sure the tables and chairs are all in the right place, put out the agendas, put in the sign-in sheets, and then stick around for, you know, at least an hour and change, and usually head out once the ball got rolling. With this hybrid model, you need someone to manage the Zoom, as we all know, right? I think we've all come accustomed to, you know, Nellie managing Triple HS Zoom, Janine managing transportation, shifting people over, making sure presentations are there, blah, 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 you know, dealing with any kind of quirks that happen right last second. They're not going to be able to do that if you guys want them to be there physically at the beginning of the meeting, you know, physically in person at the meeting, right? So I think we have to think about it in two ways. And I think it's a by committee decision for you guys to say, we can set up the meeting, right? Like generally, like we'll make it as easy as possible for you all, but we can basically make sure everything is there. We'll have it there in place for you. And Nellie and Janine will be managing the Zoom part of the meeting remotely. And so, or if you really want them there physically, then someone needs to take over the hybrid part of the meeting when they leave, because they'll be in transit going home, if that makes sense. So I just think that's the one thing I would like the co-chairs to think about is what's the most effective thing for you all with your staff or counterpart, and it might be different between each committee. So I just wanted to, no decisions tonight. I just want you to think about it.
Roberta?
So just to dive a little bit more into the tech here, Jesse, you described an outside vendor coming in. Is that only for these larger spaces and the conference room has, and how, I'm going to ask, are you certain that it's reliable and it's able to take in, have us view public feedback, remote feedback, and that the public can then hear participants effectively? I've certainly used software that does this super well. I'm just kind of curious about if this has been tested on the community board level.
We have tested it a little bit. We'll have to, be flexible. We'll have to be understanding and flexible the first few times. Some of the technology is artificial intelligence, so it's not perfect. One of the things we've noticed is that the camera is very good. It's so good that it picks up the biggest image in the room, which is normally the projected image. So then therefore, when you're looking at what you're looking at on your camera is just yourself, because the camera thinking that's the most important person because it's moving the most and it's the biggest. And so we've got to realize placement of the cameras, because they're so they're 360-degree cameras that pick up movement and sound. And so that will be the kind of stuff that we'll have to figure out. Literally, I'll say we're not the only ones, we're not alone here. Every community board is figuring out, literally community boards are putting little pieces of tape on top of in front of the camera to block it from the screen, so that it doesn't pick up the screen in the room. You know, it's not perfect technology. And like I said, we don't necessarily have a budget for this, and no one is necessarily sitting there saying, here's what you should do. So right now we've got a number of OWL Pros, which are pretty top of the line, meeting that's all in one plug and play type of thing. And so we hope to use those. We've done some test runs. We'll obviously have to see what it's like when you have a full, you know, a quorum of a committee and attendees.
And I did have just a theoretical question. In theory, you could hold a meeting that in which you basically have one person in the CB4 office managing the Zoom, everyone else on the Zoom, and there could be no vote, like committee vote, but there could be kind of an advisory comment.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest with you, I think 9 times out of 10 that might be fine. You know, not, I mean, when I say fine, meaning like if that's the worst case scenario and that happens.
Not the intention. I just want to understand what the line is.
I mean, yes, in theory, if you wanted to, we could run everything through exec in terms of a vote, and then full board as the full board vote. But yeah, I think we're going to run into certainly BLP, which is the busiest committee, who has lawyers attending it every month, who know the law is very specific. And so if once one of their clients feels like they're not being represented appropriately or being given the place to, given the following the rules, we're going to run ourselves into an issue. So we want to try to run it just as the law allows, which is quorum in place, in person, and highly recommend everybody else come virtually, which so far I really haven't heard any pushback on. So I don't think that will be an issue. I think the actual issue will maybe be us trying to make sure we have quorum every meeting, you know?
And then I had one more question. Just the small meetings and working groups, is the intention that they operate in the same manner that the other committee meetings?
By our bylaws, and the bylaw committee can bylaw task force can take this up if you want, but by our bylaws, every task force, we exclude working groups. Working groups are the only thing that we don't necessarily specifically list out as following the open meetings law, but everything else follows the opens meeting law. So therefore it all falls under the same thing in terms of notice, in terms of quorum, in terms of recording, things like that.
Thanks, Roberta. Bert?
Yeah. One, I got an answer to one of my questions that we have no budget to check, but do we have kind of an estimate, Jesse, that you might think would be appropriate?
Yeah, I can get a rough estimate is if we wanted to pay a vendor to do all of this for us, and meaning like hybrid, meaning like people can access it and everything like that. It's roughly $400 to $500 a pop, a meeting. So you can imagine, we've got 7 committees plus exec, plus full board.
Once a month.
9. That's
100,000, right?
Yeah, it's thousands of dollars a month. So what I did originally when we first hit the stride of this, I front loaded our vendor with about a year's worth of full board meetings. So we've got a nice little, what do you call it? A piggy bank. Cushion. And so we're suspecting we're going to go into that cushion, starting to use that cushion in May, at least for full boards. And hopefully we, on occasion, like Joe raised, like if there is a meeting that we have to do that way, we'll have to get the vendor, because we'll need an offsite space, and the existing technology we have would not work. It just would. It'd be, the cameras wouldn't be the appropriate cameras.
Second question. I've seen our space on 33rd Street once, and I didn't sort of retain it in terms of the size, but I like to know, like for BLP, we have, say, 10 items on the agenda. Every item, forget about people from the community wanting to testify. Every item has at least one lawyer and one applicant, if not 3. You know, that's 30 people.
But Bert, they would be online.
But wait, I'm just, and if we're talking about physically present,
No.
So the participants, so any applicant or member of the public would be encouraged to participate virtually
when
only.
you say encouraged, Jeffrey.
I mean,
But
I
they
don't
could
think we
choose
Does
can.
that
to be
mean,
there.
hey, you can't come to
technically a
this meeting, you
public-
have to be
so-
on Zoom?
So it's technically a public meeting.
Yeah, so technically, we would have to, if the applicant really wants to be there in person, that's what we have to figure out. I think with BLP is a unique case. Other community boards have literally timed them out and said, you know, you're at 6:30, you're at 6:45, you're at 7 o'clock, you're at 7:15. So we're gonna have to figure that out. We'll have to see how we're gonna have to be creative with BLP just because of the true number of applicants.
So I'm trying to understand. So say physically BLP members, committee members from the board are present, okay? Then the applicants are on Zoom. Is it like we are, everybody can see everybody else, or is it just one at a time? Because
No.
we usually have question, people from the committee will ask questions and make comments, and then we open it up to community people who might be there. Now, we don't have community people for every item on the agenda, because some of, oh, it's closing at 10 o'clock, who cares? But something come 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
we get lots of people from the community.
Yeah, so that would be the same. It'd be the same that you're doing right now. So you would have an attendees section and you would have a panelist section.
Okay, so they could,
Really what you're going to see is, just to make it clear, what you will see in your panelist section will be all of the people who are virtual will look exactly how you all look right now. All the people in person will be working off of the cameras in place, so they will be switching back. It'll switch back and forth whoever is speaking the most. It'll catch motion. So sometimes you're going to see a wide shot and you'll see like 4 of you in one shot and talking, and then it'll zoom in on that person speaking and it'll catch you speaking. So that will be the kind of the weird thing you will see. So there'll be one camera, one little Zoom box, if you can imagine, that is going to be managing everybody in person. That is one little Zoom box. The rest will all be the same exact the way you have been doing it for the last 2-3 years.
okay, thanks.
No problem.
I know I'll
Jessica?
understand it better when I
I know. It'll be a rocky road for the first month or so. We all just have to accept that.
Well, just to build off of this, I do think any potential, if there's any way to more than lightly encourage, maybe, I don't know, strongly or require that presenters be on Zoom, I think from a presenter perspective, otherwise, if every committee member is on one box, being able to get an angle in which you can also appropriately engage with the presenter, but also be seen by everyone who's joining via Zoom, from home, will be very challenging to just literally facilitate physically. So I think it's great. Like, the hybrid option makes sense. I know certain communities have really struggled being on Zoom in particular, but I think from the presenter perspective, having one unified place that everyone looks to see the presentation, regardless of whether the committee member or the public is in person or on Zoom, would be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. And I honestly don't think we'll have that much pushback from applicants and presenters if we say to them, please be virtual. I don't think. I think we'll have to manage, again, people who are in person will need to be flexible, understanding that they are, that those presenters are doing this on our behalf, and they are, they're not in the room, and it's not
of course
the same feel that we always got used to. But I think we've been there. We've been doing it for 2 years and 2.5 years.
Right.
So I think we have to be okay with that. But yes, I agree.
And I think, just quickly, I think the other benefit is not only from everyone having the same shared perspective on the presenter and getting really to see them fully in their presentation fully, but also just as it relates to the management of the meeting. And Jesse, you said, if should your staff be in person with us or on Zoom? I think it just consolidates that role of managing the presenter to be like, they know they're going to be remote. They know they can share their screen. Obviously, sometimes your team has to jump in to support that. But I think it just kind of pushes it all to one place, as opposed to someone coming in saying like, oh, I have my thumb drive. Oh, how am I going to present this? Or, it like streamlines that into one approach. Thank you.
So I have a question and a suggestion. One question is it possible with the system that the system just take the entirety on the room and doesn't jump between different people?
I mean,
like a fixed view of the committee.
I would have to look at whether we can. You should look at CB1. CB1 started doing it, and they're completely virtual now too, but they initially started doing it with the Owl Pro. It's a unique view. It's a little bit different than we're used to. So it has 3 cameras. It has a 360 vision camera, which captures basically everything, but it's a fisheye, so it distorts everything. And then it has 2 actual moving cameras in it, so it can pick up a conversation between 2 people. And so it's pretty decent. Its movement is pretty, it's not the quickest cameras in the world because it's inside a machine, but I would have to see if we could just do one or just the 360. But I think you're going to want that AI part of it where it focuses on when someone is speaking, especially because it's going to be different because the way we have our tables set up is a big round, basically all around a gigantic conference room table. So it's not going to be the U-shaped normal kind of, long table setup. And so that works much better with the Owl Pro cameras, but we can explore that. And again, like I said, it's up to you guys by committee, and if that's an option and your committee wants that, we'll just have to remember to set that up that way when we get to your committee.
So my suggestion is that we do a dry run, and you invite all of us to the office, and we take 2 or 3 people and we put them on the Zoom, right? And then we all touch it and feel it, right? Say how is it, what does it work, etc. And we are all going there and seeing how is it to set up. And so we have a little, teaching experience.
I'm happy to schedule that during. I'll just say I prefer to doing it during working hours if everybody find a time that works for everybody for 30 minutes or 45 minutes and if people can make it there, and we can have we don't need a full quorum, but we'll get the concept, and a bunch of you will be online, and someone could do a fake, a full presentation, and for sure.
Right, that would be helpful because I think we all have a lot of questions because we don't picture it.
I'll try to set. I will schedule that before we go full.
Right.
I volunteer to be online.
This is what's going to happen, everybody. I think that's what
I want to take that moment to emphasize, like, it's going to change. It's going to be a change, just like it was 3.25 years ago when we figured out how to stay on mute. And so it's process. Joe.
Yeah, I think to Jessica's point, I don't know if we can actually require the public not to come in person. We can strongly encourage whatever, but I'm pretty sure, Jesse, we can't say require, right? Because
no, we can't. My take on this is what I'm going to do, which is what I was originally going to do too, which is, at whatever I have to look at it. If I hope that it's still the CDC still has distance requirements. I can't make anybody tell me their vaccination status. I can't make anybody wear a mask. So, remember if we went through this when we did a couple in-person meetings. So what I can say though, this is the recommendation of the CDC is 6 foot distance or whatever it may be. And that will limit the number of folks that we can do it in. I think Joe is right where I'll say this, I haven't heard a lot of pushback about, oh, I need to be in person for this meeting until we get this the topic that everybody feels very passionate about. And then we'll have to figure that out. And we'll just get a bigger space, and that's what we're gonna have to do.
And to be clear, applicants are considered members of the public also. So no, there's no difference in that way.
You have Mike Noble with his hand raised.
Okay,
Jeffrey.
you can bring him over. Hey, Mike, go ahead.
Hi, I just want to chime in and tell you that I've done these hybrid meetings where there's been a stationary camera focusing on someone who's at a podium with a microphone. That person can roam around if he likes, she likes, get closer to the camera or whatever. But just, and you're not, you know, at the greatest distance, you're not going to see that person, you know, obviously like we're seeing each other here, but it's not that bad. And if it means, you know, if it means not having this chaos with the AI camera jumping all over the place, it's not terrible, you know. And I think when the community board, whichever one it was on the east side there, I think was recording meetings. That's how they used to do it. They were in an auditorium or something like that. Remember that, just CB6 or something? And that's when Gail Brewer was hoping that we would all be doing it that way. You know, remember?
Yeah.
This goes back. Yeah, right. And if you recall, that wasn't all that horrible. You know, the camera was focused pretty close up. See, so the meetings I was at, they want to get the whole room plus the podium. In our case, a fixed camera on the speaker at the podium. You know, it works.
Like I said, we can, again, like I said, we're gonna explore it. We'll see what happens, and if this doesn't, if our current design does not work, we will have to set it up differently. And you all, similar to what we did at full boards when we did with the hybrid fashion, you guys went to your microphones and spoke, and that's what we'll do. And it won't be the kind of what we're used to as a committee, but that's just what we'll have to do. And we'll figure it out. But yeah, that's a yes. We can go that route as well.
Jeffrey, when will our first in-person meeting be?
Well, we are getting indications that the executive order will be allowed to expire. I want to say it's like May 21st or something.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean,
so
June,
theoretically,
our June meeting,
our June full board meeting, correct?
And the exec.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah. You know.
Which could be the dry run, maybe.
Depends
on when it really depends on when it expires. I also think that we're very ahead of others, and a lot of people are going to be scrambling, and there's going to be a lot of meetings that are just figuring themselves out. Jesse?
Yeah. I mean, so we're already good for June full board location, Fulton Auditorium. The vendor is fine. We're good. We're going to hopefully go for the High Line again for July full board. And you know, like I said, we've got ourselves figured out in location so far, and obviously if something changes, we'll make that change. But yeah, I mean, possibly May exec and into June full board.
JD?
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm fine with everything, but I do want to emphasize there's still 1,000 people dying every day of COVID and variants. And now I think they've come out and saying you get another booster if you didn't have one for 4 months. We are in a particular situation because the state is saying you have to meet in public, and yet they are not allowing us to take precautions, such as saying you have to wear a mask or you have to sit 6 feet apart. So I would ask Jesse and Jeffrey to push the borough president a little to say, are you signing off on this? is there some way that we can have more control over our situation? And I keep thinking 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had a meeting at Fulton, right in the midst of everything, because they considered it okay, and yet it was very dangerous. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that they need to take responsibility for not allowing us to make some prudential rules.
I think that's fair. It's funny. We are totally appropriate to encourage that level of advocacy for the borough president's office. I also think it's something, given it's the state open meetings law, we might think about asking Assemblymember Simone or Senator Hoylman what they are doing as it relates to the open meeting law regulations.
I second that.
Joe?
Yeah, I think we can also, though, work with the venues that we're meeting at, because I remember that meeting at Hudson Guild, and the Guild required masks and required certain things. And I literally was the person who walked around and asked people to leave who were not meeting the requirement of the venue. So that's something we can work with the venue to deal with very easily, Jesse, I think, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we can get into those details, but yes, Joe's correct. The venue, if the venue has a recommendation and or a policy, and that's why I liked using Hudson Guild, because it's technically a senior center. So therefore it had a high level standard of temperature checks, if you remember, and masks. And so, so we certainly can do that. If the venue requires it, then we're just following the rules of the venue. And that's our way of helping that situation.
Harry?
Real quickly, as one of those people who's super top high risk, I just want to thank you both, Jesse and Jeffrey, for taking so much time on this and being so considerate and working out such an amazing plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
So appreciate everybody's comments and feedback. And I think that we're going to figure it out. Might not be perfect, especially at the start, but we'll certainly get there. So stay tuned. And obviously, if the order is extended, we'll continue meeting this way. But I actually do think full board meetings, summer, we might still host in person for the fact of it. We have the spaces booked and want to make that happen. Moving on in the agenda, chair reports from me. Port Authority, what an authority it is, and the bus terminal they've got in our neighborhood. We had a very frank and productive meeting with our whole group of elected officials and their staff. We feel it is very important that we are working to be in absolute lockstep with our elected officials to make sure the Port Authority hears us speaking as a community in one voice. We have had great cadence of communication with the Port Authority. Last year that fell off significantly. We've sent 2 letters recently calling for that engagement to begin anew. And there's just so many very basic questions that a transportation authority should be able to answer that they are just refusing to answer, that we remain incredibly frustrated. So we had a really great briefing with our electeds, and hopefully have a concrete report and a piece of a paper to share with everybody by our next meeting, but we are hot on it. Tonight, CB5 is hosting, and we are a co-host of it, a discussion on Penn Station. The meeting was originally scheduled for April 18th, with apologies to Christine for not knowing the date changed. I'm sorry about that. And they now changed the date. That's at the public library, held in person this evening, no streaming capability there, so we could not participate. But there were some very interesting advancements as it relates to the proposals around the project, including what is being referred to as the ASTM proposal, and Vishan Chakrabarty joining that group. So there's a whole bunch of sort of new things happening. And we do have a public realm task force working group meeting later this week on Thursday. So we'll see what, if anything, comes of that as well. We didn't have any set small meetings this month, but today I want to give great thanks to Councilmember Botcher and his team, Carl and Jordan, for putting together a very last minute meeting with Andrew Kimball, the president of EDC, along with his top staff, and then as well representatives from all of our elected officials' office to talk about perennial issue of Pier 94 and 92. We learned today that the lease is now public and is eligible for review only in person at EDC. This is a MOX stipulation, the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. You have to schedule an appointment and then can go review the lease in person. It's outrageous. We had, a frank discussion on what the lease includes, and I'll just note that the lease would be with 3 partners. It would be with Vornado, Hudson Pacific, which is a film production owner and studio company based in California, and then Blackstone, a real estate investment company. I think there's going to be some stuff that we're relatively pleased with, and then there's going to be stuff that we're not, and we are allowed to have comment period. And so we'll take this up at our next exec meeting and submit that by the deadline. And just so you know, I think we're going to have issue with the fact that there's no green energy stipulations. Dr. DeCat, I was channeling you aggressively at the meeting today regarding that. We're not going to be happy with the vehicular access and parking allowances, the promenade and design for access, and the fact that while there's a stipulation in the lease that requires construction to begin within 6 months of its signing, and completion must be done within 4 years, or they must have a TCO in that time. Our concern is that there's not lockstep deliverables for public realm improvements, and that they are to be done concurrently, but that doesn't mean much given the scope of the project. So that's only Pier 94. Then there's the Pier 92 stuff, which is separate. They admitted plainly that they want to engage us on this, and in the next 6 months want to figure out a more robust approach to how they can come up with a plan to activate and redevelop Pier 92. So that's high level summary. Stay tuned for sort of the slicing and dicing of the details on it, but I appreciate everybody's willingness to keep pushing this forward and have this continue to be a big issue. Christine.
So are you going to share with us, I mean, where do we find the lease?
So I'll be sending our working group, our sort of that cadre of folks on this topic email, the process. You have to send an email to a particular EDC email, and then they write back, and then you determine a time. And so I complained very loudly in front of all of our electeds today. I don't know if we could file an expedited FOIL request, but basically you're only allowed to visit it and review in person. So yes, I'll send that to everybody of relevant jurisdiction tomorrow.
That's
that's
a new concept for open, right?
Whole new concept. EDC was actually not. They were in agreement with us on this, but it's governed through MOX, the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. There's a 30-day comment period that's begun, and then there's a public hearing, and so we'll be submitting our comments in time for that. There was other concerns brought up about the type of clauses that could exist. I raised a lot of concerns about the fact that Vornado's chairman has said they are not developing anything. I raised concerns about the fact that Hudson Pacific has no East Coast real estate, and the clauses in the lease are very much dedicated to force majeure, which are standard. But what if the market tanks? What's a major question? And can they use that as a force majeure or an exit to the contract, or an excuse to say, oh, it's year 6 and we're still not done? So these are still the issues that we're working through, because for 14 years, we've had nothing. And so we made that very clear today on the call. I think that's it, Jesse, right? Okay, so over to you, boss. You're on mute.
And you called me boss. So yes, the full board agenda, the draft full board agenda, and the May committee schedule are in your Dropbox. Please take a look at them. Make sure that they are what you believe they should be. And please let me know. You don't have to tell me right now, but email me and then or your staff member, appropriate staff member, to let them know if there's something missing. The May schedule for committees is pretty as expected. Obviously just highlighting that it is the first month that the new HHS committee will be meeting its first Thursday, so that will be May 4th. We do have a number of task force and working groups meeting this month. So I'll just highlight them. The bylaw task force is meeting on the 1st at 4, and then again on the 15th, and then the 12 FAR working group is meeting on the 10th at 4, and then again on the 18th. And that, I think that's about it in terms of the committee schedule. And office space, we are chugging along. We were supposed to have our review session, DCP review session today, but the schedule went so long that they decided not to hold it. So we're going into our hearing on Wednesday. We'll be providing our 3-minute presentation to the City Planning Commission, and hopefully they will, they're not going to approve it right there, but what they'll do is they'll send it out for their 30-day review, and then we'll go ahead. Like I said, again, though, the move-in date is really not until December of 2024. So we are still looking to stay where we are. It looks like our current license agreement ends in July of this year. But I've been told by the landlord and by DCAS that most likely that will be extended to the end of the year because they're not going to need the space until then. So we will still be staying in that on the 5th floor there, at least hopefully to the end of 2023. And then by then, at that point, we most likely will be moving to a different location in the building. But we still are, no matter what, we are making sure that we have ancillary space big enough to hold a committee meeting. Actually, the space I was looking at is actually bigger than what we have now, so I'm quite happy with it, as long as we can make it work through the lease. And that's about it for me, unless anybody else has anything else. Where's Carrie? Carrie wanted me to mention tomorrow is the hearing for the LPC hearing for the formerly colored school number 4, which is something we've been pushing for very hard for the last couple of years. And so it's really great to see the wheels turn. It's really great to be at the beginning when the wheels turned, when we ask the wheels to turn and actually see them turn. It's pretty impressive. Normally it happens, generations. So so this is great. And so we're really looking forward to doing that. And I believe Jessica and Carrie are providing testimony tomorrow. So.
Thanks, Jesse. He's going to be able to moonlight as a real estate broker for DCAS in the city of New York once we finally have office space. So finally, the couple of items of new business that I mentioned at the top of the meeting, I want to go to Maria first. She's been working with our colleagues on boards 2 and 5 on hosting a public forum on mental health. And at that meeting, they are hoping to have a letter come out of it. I'll let Maria explain it, but the other boards are having their committee meeting during the time of the public forum. And since we're not doing that, Maria wanted to get a letter on the topic accordingly so we can speak hopefully in a unified voice with boards 2 and 5. Maria?
Thank you. All right, good. My cat is not screaming. So I just had to tell her to calm down. Good. So yes, we are collaborating, CB4 is collaborating with 2 and 5 to do another event. In October 2021, we actually did a mental health forum. I don't know if you all remember, where CB4 and CB5 did it together, collaborated to talk about mental health services for people who are seriously mentally ill and and unsheltered. And we were going to talk about the services and what the gaps were in servicing the people. And what we found is that based on what the experts had said on the panel, there was several things, but the things that came up the most, that resonated the most and kept coming up from each speaker were coordination of services, treatment capacity, and housing solutions. So CB4 and 5, we loosely have been talking about doing another event to follow up on the previous one. And actually earlier this year, CB2 and the co-chair for Human Services, which covers the village, the West Village, approached CB4 and 5 and asked us about putting something together. And in our first conversation, I talked about the fact that there are several solutions. There's gaps everywhere. And what is it that we want to focus on? Because there's long-term kinds of solutions when we're talking about supportive housing, permanent housing, but there's also short-term and short timeline solutions, which would be programs that already exist that are effective in expanding those kinds of programs. There's other issues too, like salary. That's a barrier for hiring people. At any rate, what we decided to do is we wanted to have the forum focus on short timeline kinds of solutions. And in our minds, short timeline is like 1 to 3 years. And that's really just more money towards programs that are already existing, but we wanted to talk with people to see what seems most effective. So we've been doing a lot of interviews behind the scenes in the past several weeks. And so far we have a panel of Dr. Van Yu from CUCS. He's the chief medical officer. He was at the last event in October of 2021. And we thought he was really practical. And so he's going to be on the panel this time. We have a chief medical officer from ICL, Dr. Ellen, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Tabor, and 2 people from Cases who do the work every day. Anyway, the point is that we want to have this event. We want to hear from the experts. We want to hear from the public. And we drafted this letter that has information, background information, and like currently what exists. You can see if you look at the letter, there's those X marks that we need to fill in. But that is what we want to move forward. I'm looking for, what we're all looking for. Oh, wait, one more important thing, the most important thing. It's a full board, it's a committee meeting for CB5 and CB2, not for CB4. Okay, and we do have the support of CB1, 3, and 6. So those are all the CBs below 59th Street. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Sometimes I may have forgotten to mention something. You might have a question.
What is the date of the forum, Maria?
It is, thank you, this Thursday at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you.
And it's until 8:30 p.m.
Okay. Paul and then Christine.
Yes, Paul.
Thanks. And Maria, I sent her an email on this as well. Is one of the discussion points the increasing of the number of beds that are Medicaid acceptable at psych hospitals? Because right now, psych hospitals anything over 16 in a facility is denied Medicaid funding. And so like Bellevue can't have more than 16 beds for psych treatment for Medicaid recipients. So yeah, how do we address that issue?
That's unbelievable. So that is one of the things that has come up in our conversations, but we were really trying to focus in on short timeline kinds of solutions. Yes, we're aware that that's an issue. If you look in the letter, one of the things we talk about is that this issue is getting more, there's more voice to this issue currently, more funding for this issue, and the governor has a plan. The mayor has a plan, and actually that's included in the governor's plan to increase the number of psychiatric beds.
That is not quite correct. It's residential beds more than 16 in an institution. You can have acute beds at any institution more than 16. So it's a different angle.
Joe, are you speaking to me or to Paul?
I was speaking to Paul because Paul, that's for residential psychiatric facilities, not for the acute stuff that Bellevue does. They have many more than 16 beds.
No, I had heard that Bellevue had restrictions as well. So as I said in my email to you guys,
Oh, I think that
this is not my topic, but I had heard that there was restrictions. And even if it is permanent housing restrictions at 16 in a facility, that still seems low for New York City.
Yes, it is low. It is low. And actually, yeah, Joe, you're correct. I apologize. I didn't clarify that, Paul.
And the governor has asked for a Medicaid waiver about that, Paul, specifically. It's now going into the process. It's a year-long process, but it's underway.
Oh, that's great. No, that's great if it happens.
Christine?
Yes, so I'd like to clarify a little bit. So first of all, from a process standpoint, the letter is to be voted on tonight because of what?
Great, thank you.
I mean, I understand you have another event coming up.
Mm-hmm. No, but that's a great question.
Is going to
let me get to it. Thank you, Christine, for probing with that question. It gets me to where I need to go, which is also, so our vision is that all, even though our letters look a little bit different, we are all 2, 4, and 6, 2, 5, 2, 4, and 5 are writing basically the same kind of letter. And it is going before all of our full boards. And we're all voting, and that's our vision, in favor of it. And the reason why is because we're to show City Council that we support this.
Okay.
That's Christine, why. The timing is off. The event happens on the 27th, this Thursday, and it's going to the full board the following week. That's why we act tonight, because there's no time to, in other words,
I'm gonna go.
Well, it could be a new business on the board, right?
Right.
What can I just clarify? That's all right. What Maria wants to be able to do is be able to say that the community board has voted in consensus on the major topics on the 27th, and so therefore there can be a combined thing. And unfortunately, that just did not happen at Triple HS committee. Not because there's an obstacle, it just with everything that was being discussed, the vote just didn't happen. So this is sort of mildly a perfunctory in the sense that we want to be able to say a voting body reviewed the letter, are comfortable with the letter, and is comfortable with Maria being able to say we want to do a sign on.
Okay.
Thank you, Jesse. And I should clarify also, Christine. Thank you, Jesse. So that's the thing I forgot to mention up front. Also, that we did have a discussion. There was supposed to be a vote on the proposed letter. We forgot to do that. The conversation went really well. There was good feedback. And it just didn't happen. That's why it's a new business item currently.
So the letter itself, you mentioned that you all want to concentrate on short-term stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so that means in your letter, the short-term interventions or the existing treatment options, or both of those?
So when we're talking about short-term, like short timeline solutions, it would be something that's already currently existing.
So that's the existing section in your letter.
Right.
Right.
So if your suggestion is that maybe I need to edit the format or move around.
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure, first of all, the definition of that. And yes, I would figure that at the beginning, you are saying we request funding of XXX to be implemented. And then you need to say where, because apparently the challenge is that it's not under 59th Street, right? So that's your challenge. You want to highlight those community board or below 59th Street, which you are putting at the bottom of it, right?
So you're saying—
So the last sentence should be the first one, right?
You're saying number 16, or you're talking about the end of the letter? I'm writing a note for
myself.
Yeah,
I think the end of the letter, where is it? The conclusion should be really moved up to or duplicated in the beginning, right? That's one concept. And then the second thing is that I think you should move the description of the existing treatment option right behind it, and then talk about the long term and the intermediate term as background later on, right? And then you just mentioned the coordination of care. And I don't know whether you are really talking about that anywhere. And maybe if what you have learned is coordination of care is really important, maybe there should be a line or a sentence about that somewhere. But that's to just make it simpler for the reader who is not the expert you are.
Oh yeah, there's so much information. It's just overwhelming, really.
Yes.
Thanks, Christine. Katie?
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm super excited about this forum that's getting hosted. And I feel like with this letter, we're trying to smush together two things. So I feel like one of the things we talked about in committee was how great it is that there are several experts who are going to be talking Thursday night, and we're looking forward to hearing their ideas and their suggestions and getting feedback. So I feel like it's sort of odd that we're writing a letter about what we're recommending before we've heard the recommendations from the experts.
That's a great point, Katie.
So can I just finish and then, but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear the feedback.
Yeah.
So I know you guys have been like talking with folks and you've already heard some of their ideas, but I guess I'm just wondering, isn't there a way that we could vote tonight and say like, we totally support having this forum and hearing from the experts, and we look forward to hearing their recommendations, and then we will write a letter to reflect the recommendations that come up, but it just, and then we write a letter that includes all the recommendations, but it just seems like we're voting to approve a letter tonight before we've heard the recommendations with lots of blanks in it. That just seems hard to me. So I guess, I'm wondering if there's a way we could sort of bifurcate the two and totally support the forum and then write a letter that has what is recommended during the forum from the experts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do hear what you're saying. I am going to give some pushback here because what I'm hearing is it sounds like your suggestion is to write a letter saying we support this event and we're gonna write a letter, which includes the recommendations from the forum. Did I get that correctly?
So yeah, I mean, I don't even know if we have to write a letter tonight. Okay. I don't know if there's a way to vote without writing a letter, but just that the executive committee supports it and we look forward to hearing the recommendations. And then I do know like how impossible it would be.
Okay, so
between the thing Thursday night and then Friday's deadline of letters, like I get that would be tricky.
Mm-hmm. So logistically, and given the issues that we've had recently, I don't think that that's realistic. This is a conversation I have had with Joe. This is a conversation I have had with Jesse regarding this particular event and turning around a letter really quickly. So the compromise is that this is what we would be doing. I don't want to make things more complicated or try to reinvent the wheel. I have been doing this with CB5 since before October of 2021. We have been talking to people who do this work every day. And so currently in the past, let's say 2 months, we've been having several interviews with different people, different levels of expertise in the field, from executive directors to directors of different things to people who do the groundwork every day. And so the information we're repeatedly hearing, and that is, we have a wealth of information already. A lot of it is combined in this letter, but there's a lot more. And so I think what we are trying to do is get the best information that we can about something kind of specific. So for example, let me just clarify something. In October of 2021, we already had an idea of what was going to come out. Right? We already knew we were going to hear housing solutions. We already knew we were going to hear about treatment capacity. We already knew there was an issue with coordination of services. But what's fascinating is that it came up during the meeting. So in having these conversations that we've had for this event on Thursday, it's been the same exact thing. A lot of conversations, and the same things that keep coming to the surface are around that IMT, intensive mobile treatment, is a great program. And they have expanded it a little bit. But of course, there's going to be room for we might hear something that we don't expect from everyone on the panel, but we also are going to have people from like DOH, MH, and other organizations and electeds who are in attendees. So we might get more information, but I think that we want to advocate for something specific and more funding around something that's specific that we are hearing repeatedly is working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm just not clear. Maybe what I need to hear is, so why can't this letter just be part of new business so that once you fill in all the blanks, can we then review the whole thing?
That's what Jesse said earlier, right?
Yeah, I think that's
Jesse said that there was a timing issue.
We're having a discussion on the letter that's been drafted. And my preference is this conversation happening, like Christine's feedback to what is before us, and then we have the opportunity to, so we have that baseline, and then we'll be able to add more. And this comes up at new business at full board, but we're sort of starting. So I wasn't anticipating a vote on this tonight.
Oh,
this will come. Sorry, I apologize. I should have clarified that because of the 7 different timelines with 5 different community boards, and the fact that Maria has been working on this issue for literally years, we have a strong base to start from. And I think having this conversation starts that, and then any takeaways that we do have, if there's more new ones from Thursday, hopefully there are, those can be incorporated, and we can incorporate them and then take that up as new business next Wednesday.
And the vision is that on Thursday evening and or like during and or after the meeting, plugging in some of what's missing in the letter and then having it ready for you all to read Friday.
Perfect.
Gotcha. So we're not voting tonight. We're just talking
that was my fault. I apologize, Katie.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it.
I mean, my
Maria.
vision was that we were, but
Okay. Got it. All right.
Roberta?
So thank you. You kind of cleared up one of my questions as well. I did want to ask, and it could be that we don't need to plan for this, but if there's any concern about running out of time, just in the evening to collect any sort of feedback or engagement from any of the attendees, and if there are alternative methods of engagement, whether that be the submission of questions or submission of
Roberta, that's a great point.
Maria and I had this debate too.
Yes, we have. And then on top of it, having it, imagine with Jeffrey, you're making a great point, Roberta, and then I have to discuss it with CB5 and 4, 5 and 2. So yes, we have talked about this. I was going to say ad nauseum, but being realistic, it's not. But so the plan is that the meeting is going to go on until 8:30. Okay, that includes the I believe public session. That's time for the experts to speak. We're only going to ask a few questions and allowing for the public to ask questions, make comments. We are going to be timing everything. And then CB's, what's going to happen, I will remain on, okay, as long as the meeting goes on for. The plan is that CB's 5 and 2 will then go into their, like the committee section, where the committee members speak and vote on something. And that is the plan. How long that will go on, I don't know. But I will be present for it and whoever else wants to be present. And that is what we're doing. But that's a great point that, yes, we've all banged our heads a little bit about. There were some ideas, bless you, Joe. There were some ideas about, for example, having the public email us with their comments, questions, or concerns. That is not what we're going to be doing. That is not a public discussion. Did I answer your question? Is that okay?
Yep. And thank you for all of the attention and care that you put into this. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I need to be getting paid for this.
You and me both, Maria. Marty?
Marty?
Shouldn't we be voting to support the process so that Maria at least has the vote that she was looking for when she came into the meeting?
That's a good idea.
I've heard everybody talk favorably about the letter. Letter is a template of what may come out. And I would at least like to be able to say that I'm in favor of what's going on. Thank you very much for your hard work. And then vote on whatever the final letter is at the board next week.
Very
I
good.
like that idea.
Thank you, Marty.
Who needs to make a motion?
Was that a
Thanks,
motion,
Maria.
Marty?
Sure, why not?
I'll make that second.
We anticipate that to swiftly take effect next Wednesday then.
God willing.
Thank you, Maria, very much for this, and we'll stay tuned for Thursday.
I look forward to seeing you
Jeffrey,
all,
you have to
especially
take
you,
the
Jeffrey.
vote.
Yeah,
You
can we
have to
take the
the
vote?
Oh, see, again, I did it again.
I'm sorry. So then I missed the motion.
Yes.
Marty
has
made the motion, Joe seconded the motion, or Christina seconded the motion.
Everybody.
There's
Which
two parts
was-
to the
which
motion.
was-
It's to support the process and
Oh.
to support the general direction of the letter as we've seen it.
Thank you. Any opposed?
Process and the general.
Abstentions? Present not eligible? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody.
Very good.
Up next, another piece of new business. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting, a recently discovered illegal demo on West 48th Street. Joe will share more detail, but in effect, the council member's office has already been on it with DOT, thanks to discovery by those that live in the neighborhood. This is so often how we find out about our illegal demos, through our eyes or block association neighbors. And so there's a facade now missing. DOB has claimed that the work is permitted, but obviously, given the restrictions on the no demolition in the special Clinton, more to be had. So Joe wanted to bring a new letter up tonight that we can get out, given DOB's sort of ignorance on the special district. Joe, more to share there?
Yes, just briefly. So first, sent to Jesse. Did you put in the Dropbox, Jesse?
Did.
Yeah, so it's still in draft. There's a lot of missing pieces because this was discovered on Wednesday of last week and it went to housing as opposed to land use, which had not met. So it can come to exec tonight. And will be discovered since the council member staff talked to the DOB on Friday and said there was no problem. Unbelievably, get ready for this, Jeffrey. This was filed as a new building application in 2018. It was disapproved. It was then refiled as an enlargement, an expansion in 2019 with the exact same documents that were filed for the new building application, including foundation work and structural work. And then they proceeded to amend it during 2020 and 2021 multiple times. So I certainly am not believing that DOB understands what's going on here because it looks as if we're going to have the 343 West 47th Street building all over again, where it was filed as an alteration, remove this, remove that, and it ended up all of a sudden one day the facade was gone, and then they started taking out parts of the building. So our letter is basically one of those, this is our 13th. This is our 14th or 13th illegal demolition application that's gone through. And we'll tweak it a little bit more tomorrow. I have to incorporate that information I found from DOB today. It basically asks for an audit of the process and ask DOB to put it on a watch list.
Really remarkable that given the technologies that we have, could probably ask a chat bot to come up with something and they would more effectively implement it. Christine?
Joe, wouldn't that make sense since we have 13 of them to make a letter about the 13 and send them to
it actually is going to
economic development, who is the deputy mayor in charge of DOB?
Jeffrey,
I think it's Maria Torres Springer.
Maria Torres Springer, right?
I think I would be in favor of taking a little bit, not all the details, but a cover page and attach the letters and say, this is the 13th, your problem, your process is broken and we want you to do an audit and bring it to the next level above.
I think you're right, Christine. And I actually was going to put the links to every one of our letters in this letter.
But it needs to go to somebody else.
I think you're right.
We can do an admin letter for that to happen, right? I mean, let's get the letter, our normal letter. We can do an admin letter that we're not.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we do that. I mean, just say, this is 13 and that's it. Okay. And I'm sorry, I have a side question. What about the buildings which are on 9th Avenue between 34 and 33?
Those are not covered by the demolition restriction.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what about 42nd Street between 8 and 9?
Which building?
All the small buildings which are on the north,
They're-
apparently they were just sold.
They're not covered by the demolition restriction. They were in the perimeter area of Clinton Special.
Got it. Thank you.
Jessica?
Yeah, just a question on the letter. I know obviously there's a lot of late information, so I fully appreciate that. I was just hoping you could speak specifically to the section that says proposed redevelopment. Obviously, you're waiting on that plan, but are you anticipating, I don't mean to like speak in hypotheticals, but are you anticipating that it's going to exceed what is allowed, or what is the intention of that section?
The problem is we don't even know what's proposed. I have to go into DOB in a little more depth to pull that out of there. I wasn't able to find it on the first go, Jessica.
Okay, so presumably though, if there's nothing there that's in conflict, that section will come out.
In the zoning section of their filing, it looked like the proposed building is compliant. The problem is, I think they're pitching a building as a renovation and enlargement, but they're actually having plans for a new building. That's the disconnect here.
Got it. Thank you.
It's in pieces, not as a whole, basically.
Right. And it's 7 or 8 filings each time. That's why it's almost, Jeffrey, like they've done it this way on purpose to sort of blow the smoke.
Obfuscate the system. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, I misspoke. DOB reports to Meera Joshi, the deputy mayor for operations. So FYI on that. Katie?
Yeah, just a quick question. In line 46, it says that the building was occupied until recently. Like, was it recently 3 years ago or 2 months ago? Do we have any sense?
I have to get that from the block association. I haven't gotten that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there's no questions, I will take a motion to adopt this letter, please. Oh, Leslie, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Old business. Sorry.
Oh, okay. A motion to adopt, please.
Motion.
Thanks, Katie. Is there a second? Christine, I'll take that as a second. Any objections? Present, not eligible? Abstentions? The letter passes with
And this
thanks
will
to
be
Joe
ratified.
and our friends on
Ratified at
47.
the full board, right, Jesse?
Yep.
Jeffrey?
I'm sorry?
It'll be ratified at the full board.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you all. This is beyond tight time frame.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I just have one old business. I know you sent a letter and it was just a paragraph to electeds about the casino, or kind of alluding to the casino. A, did you get any response from any of them? And B, I don't know about anyone else on this Zoom here. I am getting inundated with pro casino ads, pro casino, so I don't know if we should be doing more, but anyway, my first question was, did you get any response or anything? And then.
No, we wrote a letter reaffirming our understanding, our commitment to the Western Rail Yards rezoning and our understanding for that process. It was very straightforward with that. No, we did not get a response. So no. And also I haven't gotten any ads. I'm really surprised. So I guess I'm not walking on the right blocks, Leslie.
You haven't gotten lobbyist calls?
Yeah, there's calls, there's Facebook groups now that are kind of infiltrating other groups. I just don't know if we're going to have, and I understand our hesitancy because there's no official, you know what I mean? There's nothing, I guess, official, right? Or
there's no applications.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Should we be kind of heading it off at the pass and have some sort of community? I don't know. I don't know. Or we're just going to wait, take the wait and see stance.
I mean, the casino applicants, my understanding, are still waiting and seeing because they're in a question and answer period, and they haven't even received questions. They haven't even received answers back from the state right now. So everything is still very much unknown.
They haven't waited to hire lobbyists.
Their lobbyists are already, I know, contacting big building boards to meet for lunch and have meetings with the tenants. So they're in, action mode. They're not waiting. They're having personal one-on-ones with people. I just didn't know if there was a direction or a.
But I guess the question is, is our position that we have taken well understood by the neighborhood?
We referenced gaming in the letter.
Right, but I mean, is that how do we communicate better maybe with the block associations?
Or is it, Christine, you made a good point, or is it our position? We haven't had any public, we don't know our position yet, right? I mean.
No, our position is that in CB4, we want to see what has been committed on the Western Rail Yard, which means we don't want to see a casino. But it doesn't say that.
No, absolutely. I agree with that, but there's been no specific community discussion on it, at least, sponsored by us or facilitated by us. And I know people are asking questions, especially when it pops up on your Facebook or on your Instagram every 2 minutes.
I just don't know what to do about it.
What do you think, Jeffrey? It's kind of a weird thing. It's like they're like advertising for themselves and calling people to support something no one even that they've not quite applied for.
It's classic New York. We have something is going to happen, and there's no framework for the way it will happen. And so,
like cannabis,
it's everything. It's bike lane. It's literally every issue is the same. And so, I am given the fact that we have such a strong point of reference as it relates to the very detailed, zoning guidelines for the Western Rail Yards.
Maybe Jeffrey, you could have an interview with the local press.
I mean, we got actually very good coverage on our letter.
Yeah.
At the time, oh God, yeah, because it got wrapped up into MSG stuff, and then it came out with a whole bunch of casino stuff as well. So our letter picked up quite a bit of traction. And Cranes, Patch, AM New York, just off the top of my head for sure. But I wonder if this is something we can talk to the borough president about, given that there's multiple different locations, and is there something to zoom out a little bit? So it's not just on us, but is this a broader discussion for their office or others to have as potentially something formal is announced? Alan?
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, in general, given the reports of all the unfilled positions in the city, in the administration, are we beginning to see the deterioration of oversight of services? In fact, people thinking about, what is going to happen if the city moves ahead with this? Are we not getting the oversight that we used to get, perhaps, which wasn't that great a lot, but are things really deteriorating now that all these positions seem not to be being filled by the current administration? Just a thought.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
My understanding is there's not even a framework by which the advisory councils who will take the vote on the applications even exist or operate. So again, classic New York. Idea, something's going to happen, no way for it to happen, no idea what's going to happen. So I will bring this back and report back to you guys accordingly. Thank you for raising it, Leslie. So,
motion to adjourn.
There we go. I will see everybody next week. Full board and at Maria's Forum on Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
By the way, it was Jeffrey's birthday yesterday. How did you not?
Happy birthday, Jeffrey.
Happy birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
How did you leave that out? Goodbye.
Thank you. It's quite okay. Good night, everybody.